Why is low back strength not the answer to overcoming lower back pain? Social media and a lot of people on it are going to tell you otherwise, but I want to share with you, first of all, some real life examples of why that isn't the case and how that isn't the case. Hopefully it will be quite logical for you to understand. Then we'll look at why back extensions won't cut it and they won't give you the low back that you're searching for. And then I'll finish with what I recommend. And hopefully by the time we get there, you'll have a better understanding of why I'm saying what I'm saying. So the first part is some real life examples. The first one is me. When I was a teenager, I had a flexion based low back injury. So from bending down and picking things up. It wasn't things that were heavy. They were light, but I would do them regularly. And the activity was Skittles. So in the UK, there is a game much like 10-pin bowling, but there wasn't the machines that picked the Skittles up at the end of the alley. It was a person, and that was me. So I would be doing that multiple times an evening, 2 to 3 evenings a week to earn me some money when I was a teenager. That eventually led to a low back injury because it happened whilst I was doing it. So it wasn't heavy. It was just a lot of flexion not every night, 2 to 3 nights a week. Flexion, 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 flexion. Just bending over, picking up these little Skittles, putting them back on where they're supposed to go. And that eventually ended up in an injury. Now, I was a teenager. I didn't know what was wrong with me. So I didn't really do anything about it because what would happen after a few days is it would go away and I'd be sort of able to resume normal life, but it would keep recurring. Again, I didn't go to the gym at the time because going to the gym as a teenager wasn't a thing then. I would say maybe 1 or 2 of my friends may have done it. But at that time, it wasn't a thing. Now, it's very different. So I didn't have a strong back. The other example comes in this book here called The Gift of Injury. It's written by a powerlifter called Brian Carroll and Dr. McGill. Now, that is a scan of his low back. Now, I didn't have the luxury of a scan of my low back, so I don't know what exactly was wrong with it, but it was a flexion injury. But with regards to this one, he's a power lifter. He had disc bulges, he had crushed vertebra, he had bone edema, and he had a sacral fracture. So this wasn't a flexion-based injury. That type of injury is more down to the load that's being put through it and the compressive load, because when the muscles contract, like when you hold a sponge and it crushes the sponge, when the muscles contract around the spine, they are kind of like crushing the spine, they're crushing the bone because they're contracting so much that they sort of crush it, if you will. Now, what's common between those two injuries? Because mine was flexion, his is a load and compressive type of injury. But there is one commonality. When the load on the spine exceeds the capacity of the spine, and you do that for a prolonged period of time, then you get your injury. So it doesn't really matter what the mechanism is, but it is important to know what the mechanism is because that's how you get yourself out of it. So when the load exceeds the failure tolerance or the capacity of the tissue, the bone, the disc, the ligament, the muscle, and it does that for a prolonged period of time, you will get an injury because the body is slowly breaking down. Now, again, with this, all of those injuries to his spine didn't happen in one moment. It didn't happen at one lift. It started to happen, and it slowly happened over a period of time. And as he would go on, the pain would increase and increase and increase and get worse and get worse and get worse. Mine didn't do that. Mine was in the form of painful catches. So the back would go into spasm, it would lock, it would be like that for 3-4 days a week, and then it would kind of go away. Then it would come back again, then it would go away, then it would come back again, then it would go away. So again, my pain patterns, my triggers were very different to this one. But the one common thing was that when the load exceeded the capacity of the spine to cope with it, and it did that for a long period of time, then the injury came. So that's sort of, I guess, example number one, because the logic is that if I strengthen my back, I'm not at risk of injury. But I'm never going to get my back as strong as Brian Carroll, the powerlifter, the world record holding powerlifter. I'm never going to do that. So if he's getting injured, why am I going to be pain free? Because as logic would hold, if I get my back stronger, it can cope with more, and then therefore it won't get injured. But as the example goes here, he is getting in. He has a very strong back. But what we were both doing is exceeding what we were capable of, and we did that for a prolonged period of time. So as we get stronger, we will exceed more. We will exceed more if you don't know what you're doing. And that's what we need to talk about next when it comes to exercise and how we go about training the back properly.